Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Before we get started this week, just a quick note to let everyone know that I've been working on adding hardcover versions of my books to the Amazon store. So far, you can grab the entire Toshiden, Exploring Japanese Urban Legends series in hardcover, and I'm constantly adding more, so if you're a hardcover collector, do check them out. We also have a brand new design up in the Kowabana merchandise store. You can check that out at kowabana.store. We have shirts, mugs, stickers, masks, and much more, so do check it out and help support the show at the same time. This week, we're taking a look at some fearsome objects you should be very, very careful interacting with. First up, a group of friends find a strange ball hidden in the basement of an abandoned temple. It's hidden inside a box covered with charms, so you would think that would be sign enough to leave it be. But of course, curiosity killed the cat, as they say. Find out just what this ball is and why it's so deadly in Dream Enchantment. This story happened close to 10 years ago. It was right about the time we were about to graduate from high school. I had already decided what I would do after school. Rather than continuing my education, I decided I'd find work right away, and so I spent each of my final school days just trying to kill time. And then one day, one of my friends asked me to visit an abandoned temple at the foot of a nearby mountain with him. We'd been there numerous times before, but it would be a great way to kill some time, so I agreed. 4 of us agreed to go. Myself, A's girlfriend E, and her friend K. I had met A's girlfriend before, but it was my first time meeting K. Unexpectedly, she was just my type, so I was super excited and the 4 of us made a lot of noise as we walked over to the temple. It wasn't that far away, and we soon arrived. Although we had been there numerous times before, it wasn't the nicest place to be at night, and so the 4 of us all fell silent at once. "I've been here so many times, but man, it still creeps me out," A said. "Yeah, well, it's not like abandoned temples are great places to be," I replied. "It's the first time I've ever been here. It really is creepy, huh?" "Kay, have you ever been here before?" E asked her friend. "Yeah, I've come here with my boyfriend before." My heart dropped at that word, and suddenly I was no longer excited to be here. Honestly, in that instant I just wanted to go straight home. "Look, this place sucks, and we've seen it now, so let's go back." "Yeah, it is pretty late. Let's go home." Then, as we were getting ready to leave, Kay stopped us. "Hey, looks like there's a staircase or something over there," she said. I hadn't noticed it before, but there really was. We should have stopped right there and left, but curiosity got the better of me, and I told everyone I was going to check it out. A and E both told me to stop, but then Kay said she wanted to go as well. So the 2 of us agreed to go check it out. A and E decided to wait outside, just in case. And so, with a torch in hand, the 2 of us went down the stairs. They weren't very long, and we soon reached the bottom. We found a storage room about 10 tatami mats large, and it was full of books and other things piled up randomly. "Well, this is boring," I said. "It's nothing but old books." "Seriously, I was hoping there might be some treasure or something," Kay said. "You seriously came here hoping for money," I thought. And while rummaging around, I found what looked like a Buddhist altar buried against the far wall. "Ah! A safe!" Kay screamed. It was clearly an altar, I thought, and ignoring her, I walked over to it. There were several charms pasted on the middle of it, which certainly put me on edge, and I went to walk away when Kay went straight for the altar and opened it. Like, come on, seriously? The charms ripped open and dust flew everywhere as the altar opened. At first, I thought there was nothing inside, but then I saw a rotting box made of paulownia in the corner. Kay immediately grabbed it, and when she opened the lid, we saw a ball shining faintly inside. The moment I saw it, chills ran down my spine, and for a moment, it felt as if I was going to pass out. Kay didn't seem to feel any of this. "It's so pretty. I opened it, so it's mine," she said happily as she looked at the ball. "You idiot! Look where it was. There's no way that thing is anything good. Put it back and let's get out of here," I said. "You're such a chicken," she replied with a smile. "I'm sure it's nothing." Then she went straight back up the stairs. I'm not so sure about that, I thought, but I tried to convince myself that was so and followed her up the stairs. As soon as we reached the top, both A and E yelled at us. "What took you so long?" Seemed we had been down there longer than we thought, and it was almost 2 a.m. Of course, I was terrified, and the 4 of us rushed home. All I could think about at the time was getting back, and I entirely forgot about that ball. The boredom of daily life hit me once more, and exactly 1 week later, A contacted me again. We arranged for all 4 of us to meet at his house this time for drinks. Everyone was already there by the time I got there, and they had already started drinking too. "Hey, good to see you, man. You're late," A said. "A long time no see, I guess. What's it been? A week?" E said. "Hey, it has been about a week, huh?" K said. I almost didn't recognize her. It had only been a week, but she had changed so much. Her natural makeup was much heavier now, and her long black hair was done up in gyaru style. "Kay? Is that you? You've changed so much," I said. "You think so?" Kay had always been rather upbeat and energetic, but now she seemed even more so. "What's going on? Something good happen? You look super pleased about something," I said. "Sure, maybe," she replied with a small chuckle. Honestly, it creeped me out a little. And so, the 4 of us started drinking and talking about our future jobs and schools and such. "You're gonna take over your family business, right?" I said to A. "Well, what about you two?" A's family had a long-running store that sold stuff like dolls and little swords and armor for kids. "I'm going to a local university," E said. "I'm gonna help out at A's place as well." A and E had been dating since the 1st grade of high school, and they were one of those annoying couples that always spoke about getting married someday. So, it was a pretty obvious answer. "As for me," Kay said, "there are so many things I want to do that I still don't know. But I feel like no matter what I choose, it'll go well, so I'm not worried at all." At the time, her reply made me think that she was just really confident. But the more I spoke to her, the weirder everything she said started to sound. Her words overflowed with confidence, or more like she was overly confident in herself. Now, that itself isn't a bad thing, but it was a little over the top, and it was at that point that I remembered the ball. On that note, Kay, what happened to that ball? Did you put it back? I asked. "Huh? What's this about a ball?" A said. "When we were down in that temple basement, Kay found a ball there. There were charms on the box, so I figured it probably wasn't anything good, right?" "Charms? What the hell did you bring back? Kay, what did you do with it?" "Well, I was the one who opened it, so it's mine. I still have it, Kay answered. Then she took the ball out of her bag. Maybe I was just imagining it, but it seemed to shine differently to the first time I saw it, and that same feeling I felt the first time was even stronger than before. "What the hell is that?" A said. "That ain't right. Just looking at it makes me feel sick." It seemed A felt the same way I did. "No way," Kay replied. "On the contrary, ever since I took this home, I've had nothing but fantastic dreams, and nothing but good things have happened." According to her, ever since she took that ball home, various small dreams she'd had ever since childhood had been fulfilled, and her grades at school were going up too. A piece she wrote for a magazine was even chosen to be published as well. So that was why she was so confident, I thought. That was why her style had become more outrageous and everything she said brimmed with overconfidence. "Give me a look at it," A said. "Putting aside whether it's good or bad, it's not normal, right?" Having said that, he took the ball from Kay to inspect it. "It's not stone or metal, but the surface seems to be varnished, so maybe it's lacquer. But not just that. There's gotta be something else mixed in here." A was familiar with these types of things, thanks to his family business, and he stared intently at the ball. "Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe if I show it to Dad, he'll know." And with that, he handed the ball back to Kay. We went back to drinking and chatting after that, but as it started getting late, we decided it was time to go home. As we were at the front door and about to leave, A said something again. "Kay, lots of good things might be happening now, but you know that ball isn't normal. Make sure you return it right away." "It's fine," she said. "When I'm done with it, I'll let you guys borrow it too." She smiled, but it was the last smile of hers we'd ever see. I forgot all about the ball after that and returned to regular life. About 2 weeks later, I was bored one night, so I decided to go for a walk to the convenience store. On the way, I ran into E. "Oh, are you by yourself today? That's rare. Are you guys fighting again?" God, everyone thinks we always spend every waking minute together. Whatever. Look, have you seen Kay recently? No, not since that night. Why? I haven't heard from her in a week, and she hasn't been to school either. I'm worried. Well, maybe she's sick. So why don't the three of us head over to her house and check sometime? Tell A for me, I said, and then made my way to the convenience store. Once I was done shopping, I suddenly remembered that ball again. Why was that strange ball made? And by who? Maybe I should ask my father about it, I thought. And so, once I got home, I did. Dad, do you know that abandoned temple at the foot of the mountain? Yeah, why? Well, my friend found a ball there recently, and ever since then, she's had success after success. I just think it's a bit weird. I have no idea. It was already abandoned when I was just a boy, but if it bothers you so much, maybe you should ask A's grandfather about it. He might know something. I figured I'd ask the next time I went over to his house, and then, suddenly, I got a phone call. It was from A. This is bad, man. You gotta come over here right away. That was the only thing he said, and then he hung up. I knew something had to be up from the serious tone of his voice, so I jumped on my bike and rushed over to A's house. He lived close by, only about 5 minutes away, and when I got there, A and E were waiting for me. What's going on? You're not gonna tell me that you're pregnant or something, are you? I said. This isn't the time for jokes, man. That ball Kay has, It's definitely not something good." I had no idea what he was on about. "I'll explain later, but we have to head over to Kay's house right now." And so, the three of us got on our bikes and started pedaling. A explained a little on the way. Naturally, both he and E were concerned about this ball Kay had, so he thought his grandfather might know something about it. "Grandpa, you know about that abandoned temple, right? My friend found a strange ball there. Do you know anything about it?" he said to his grandfather. "The abandoned temple? At the foot of the mountain? Why the hell did you go there? What happened to the ball? Do you still have it now?" he replied. His grandfather was always so funny and happy, but the look on his face at that moment was apparently very serious. "I don't have it, my friend does." "Bring it right away," his grandfather interrupted him before A could even finish speaking, and after that, A immediately contacted me. Seemed his grandfather felt the same way I did, and so we fell silent and pedaled as fast as we could towards Kay's house. As soon as we arrived, we heard the sound of something breaking and a woman's screams. We quickly got off our bikes and rang the doorbell, fearing the worst. There was no answer, but the door was unlocked and clearly it was an emergency. So we rushed in and ran towards Kay's room. The moment we opened her door, I thought my heart was going to stop. Kay's entire family was in her room, and in the middle of them all was Kay, her hair a mess and mumbling something as she held a knife in her left hand. There was no sign of the Kay we knew in her at all. The sight before us was so shocking that all three of us froze on the spot. "What the hell are you doing?" Kay's older sister said to her. "Please, I'm begging you, just hand it over." But as soon as she tried to approach her, Kay screamed and started slashing her knife through the air. Luckily, she missed her sister, but we would be unable to approach her like this. So the three of us tried to get through to her verbally instead. "What are you doing? That's dangerous, come on. What happened?" I said. "Kay, please, just put that down and let's talk, yeah?" E said. The three of us spoke to her as though we were trying to persuade her, but she didn't appear to be listening at all and kept mumbling to herself. Listening closer, it appeared she was muttering, "I have nothing. There's nothing I can do." The situation was tense and everybody was frozen. Then, finally, Kay made the first move. She let out a scream that sounded like a man and then stabbed herself in the right arm. Everyone was stunned and a silence fell over us all like a blanket. But then the very next moment, E screamed and Kay's family jumped at her to hold her down. Kay ignored them and continued stabbing her right arm, muttering, "This means nothing. I don't need it." I was so shocked by this strange situation that I couldn't move. But Kay continued stabbing herself and her blood dripped to the floor. The sight seemed so unreal and I just stood there, my face pale, unable to think properly. I turned to look at A and the others, pleading for them to do something, and then everyone again jumped at Kay to hold her down. That, it seemed, was enough to kick my brain into action, to realize that what was happening before me was reality, and it was happening right here, right now. I came back to my senses and joined them in holding her down. Despite being so thin, Kay was unbelievably strong, and she struggled as she tried to shake us off. Everyone tried desperately to hold her down for several minutes, and then, finally, she stopped trying to shake us off and started muttering again. "I don't need it. I don't need it," she said, slashing at her own face and then turning the knife on her own stomach. Kay's sister screamed and cried as she sat beside her, and Kay's mother desperately tried to stop the bleeding while her father called an ambulance. It was like her arm was hanging on by a thread. Her face was deeply scarred, and her stomach was bleeding profusely. Her room looked just like a picture of hell itself. The three of us stood there, trembling and unable to do anything. The ambulance soon arrived, as well as police, who had been alerted by the neighbours. Kay was taken to the hospital alongside her family, and we were taken to the police station for questioning. It wasn't anything like an interrogation. They just asked us a few simple questions, like how Kay had been acting recently, and when we were done, they let us go home. We were all minors, so our guardians came to pick us up. My father, E's mother, and A's grandfather. As we were about to leave, A took something out of his pocket and showed it to me. It was the ball. "Come to my house tomorrow," he said, and then left with his grandfather. My father asked me all sorts of questions, but I just answered vaguely. Nothing felt real as we headed home, and that night I didn't sleep a wink. Next thing I knew, it was morning. I washed my face, pulled myself together, and then made my way over to A's house to ask him everything. Just as I got there, I ran into E. "Hey, you're up early today too, huh?" Understandable, considering what happened yesterday. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep last night." Seemed she couldn't sleep either, but considering what happened, that wasn't so strange. "Did you hear anything about Kay?" "No, I went over to the hospital first thing, but they weren't allowing visitors, and I couldn't ask anyone how she was doing, so..." "I see." As we were talking, A and his grandfather emerged from the factory behind their house, and when they saw us, they made their way over. "You two are early. You're already here. All right, come inside." His left cheek was rather red and swollen. We went inside, but rather than guiding us to his own room, he guided us to his grandfather's room. "Grandpa's gonna take a shower, so please wait a moment. I'll bring something to drink," A said, and then he left the two of us alone in the room. A had the ball when we left Kay's house the day before, and he seemed to know something on our way over there, something he'd heard from his grandfather, but I didn't ask, or perhaps couldn't ask him what it was about. The two of us simply waited, tense and a little skeptical. About 5 minutes later, A and his grandfather entered the room. "Ah, it's been a long time," his grandfather said to me. "How have you been?" "A long time, but it hasn't even been a month since we last met," I said. "Really?" he answered with a laugh, and then sat down on a cushion. "All right, before we get started." He then stood up again and slapped both E and I. "Ow! What the hell? Are you trying to hurt us?" I said. "Be glad that's all I did," he replied. "If you had made one mistake, then you could have ended up like that girl Kay." At that, we all fell quiet. A short while later, it was A that finally broke the silence. "I know that we did something wrong, but neither of them even know what this thing is. Can you explain it to them, seeing as they're involved in all?" His grandfather sighed, and then quietly started talking. "That ball was made long ago. He apparently didn't know exactly when, but it was, by all accounts, rather old. Long ago, before people really understood what dreams were, a young man by the name of Solske was trying to figure out a way to explain what they meant. In dreams, sometimes people or things that the dreamer doesn't even know appear, and sometimes those things can become reality, meaning that dreams could have hidden power, and if so, he wanted to find a way to utilize that power in a useful way. As such, he travelled all around asking people about their dreams. Throughout his travels, Solskjaer arrived at a particular village, and, as usual, he went around asking the people there about their dreams. After listening to people tell their stories for several days, the village chief finally appeared. He asked Solskjaer if he would mind joining him and listening to his story. Solskjaer agreed and made his way to the chief's house, where they sat down to chat. It seemed that the chief's only daughter had been having nightmares night after night, so she could barely sleep, and he wondered if there was anything Solskjaer might be able to do for her. Solskjaer put to use all the knowledge he had gathered from talking to different people, and gave the girl what we would now call therapy. A few short days later, the girl's nightmares completely stopped, and the village chief was overjoyed. The villagers were so pleased that they wanted to build a house for Solskjaer to live in there. Solskjaer was initially unsure of this, but he finally accepted their warm welcome and became one of the villagers himself. Solskjaer was well liked and popular amongst the villagers, and because the village chief's daughter had opened her heart to him since their therapy sessions, the chief hoped to marry the pair and finalize his inclusion into village life. However, there was one man, a servant of the village chief, who didn't like this idea at all. He originally became a servant because he had his heart set on the chief's daughter, and hoped that he would marry her and take over the village himself one day. And so, the servant found Solskjaer's existence most disagreeable. He wondered if there wasn't something he could do about this, and one day, he happened to hear another servant talking about the chief's daughter, and decided he would take advantage of the situation. The other servant spoke of how the girl had lustful dreams night after night. She had spent her entire life locked away, and, other than the servants, had never even spoken to a man, despite being of marriageable age. There was no doubt that the chief's daughter liked Solskjaer, but whether that was a good thing or not wasn't yet certain. And so, the servant went to the village chief. "The reason your daughter has been having so many lustful dreams lately is because Solskjaer has plans to use your daughter to become the village chief himself. That was his intention from the very beginning," he said. The chief was beside himself with rage. The chief planned to let Solskjaer take over his position in the village naturally, so there was no need for him to go to such lengths to get the job. To betray his trust like that was simply unforgivable. The chief summoned Solskjaer and then accused him of betraying his trust. Solskjaer claimed to have no knowledge of what he spoke of, but the chief did not listen. The servant was a man who had worked for the chief for many long years, while he thought of Solskjaer as a newcomer who manipulated dreams and nothing else. The chief then gave him 2 weeks to make his daughter stop having these dreams, or else. Solskjaer tried with all his might, but his efforts only made matters worse. After all, he was the reason for those dreams in the first place, and now here he was, right in front of her. At the same time, the servant badmouthed Solskjaer to the other villagers, and soon they turned against him as well. The people who had been so warm to him up until that point turned cold, avoiding Solskjaer and isolating him in the village. The people who had helped him and shared their food with him now no longer did so. Full of despair, with everyone's trust in him crumbling and no food to eat, Solskjaer was driven into a corner and found himself losing his wits. Gone mad, Solskjaer had a repulsive idea. Dreams are things that we see in our head, so why not directly look inside that head? Normally, this would be a meaningless thought, but to the mad Solskjaer, the thought itself had no meaning, and all he could do was pursue his dream. He attacked the villagers, hunting them down and cracking their skulls open to reach the brains inside. After 10 days of this, Sosuke showed up at the chief's mansion, a completely transformed man, and offered him a single ball. With this, her lustful dreams would disappear, and she would only ever see good dreams again. And just as soon as he appeared, he left again. The chief handed this ball to his daughter, and the lustful dreams stopped right away. After that, she only had dreams that she herself found to be quite pleasant. The chief was most pleased and forgave Sosuke, but of course, that was not yet the end of the story. Not even a week later, the chief's daughter seriously harmed herself, just like Kei had, and then took her own life. The chief searched all over for the ball that Sosuke gave him, thinking it to be the cause of these strange events, but it was nowhere to be found. Sosuke also disappeared without a trace, and nobody knew where he was. But then, the real nightmare hit. The ball infected everyone in the village with dreams. They all saw what they deemed to be fine dreams, but after a certain amount of time had passed, they ended up harming themselves and then taking their own lives, just like the chief's daughter had. The chief grew most afraid of the curse that Sosuke had laid upon them. Those who had no knowledge of this curse were afraid to dream, fearing that they might be next, and many avoided sleep for days in the hopes of not dreaming. Then one day, a traveling monk arrived in the village looking for food, and sensing that something was up, he paid a visit to the chief's mansion. After hearing his story, he informed the chief that he was afraid there was nothing they could do, unless they found that ball and did something about it. The monk took the chief and several villagers with him to Sosuke's house. They informed the monk they had already searched the area, but the monk insisted that the ball would undoubtedly be somewhere inside, and so they checked again. Again, they found nothing, but then the monk told them to start digging. Several men pulled up the floorboards, and beneath them, they found Sosuke's rotting corpse, carefully holding 4 balls. The moment the monk saw this, he covered his mouth as though to stop himself from throwing up, and then he turned to everyone present. He informed them to tell his close friend, a doll maker, to come right away, and until then, nobody was to go near the house. Several days later, the doll maker arrived during the night, spoke with the monk, and then went with him to Sosuke's house. The two remained inside until morning, finally emerging with 4 Paulonia boxes. Then, the monk informed the chief and villagers how the balls were made. It was a repulsive act. First, Sosuke condensed human brains, then mixed these with the ashes of human bones and blood. Then he created a lacquer mixed with his own blood, and with each coat, he harmed his own body. With each coat of lacquer, his hatred and resentment grew, until finally he was covered in so many scars that his hatred could never be forgotten. And then, the balls were complete. The monk called this dream enchantment, and although he had no idea where Sosuke learnt it, it was a terribly dangerous black art. There was a certain level of perfection that had to be achieved to complete this dream enchantment, as well as a certain rule that must always be followed. First, the balls had to be created so perfectly that they shined, and second, you must always make 4 of them. The lowest grade ball was called the 4th ball, then the 3rd, then the 2nd, and finally, the ball with the highest degree of perfection, the most complete, was called the 1st ball. Neither the monk nor the doll maker were from the village, and thus hadn't been cursed by the balls. Thus, they were unable to take the 1st or 2nd, as their influence was too strong. The monk attached charms to the Paulonia boxes, and instructed the villagers to keep them somewhere safe and out of sight, where nobody might ever stumble upon them. Then he and the doll maker took the third and fourth balls and left the village. The monk returned to his hometown and built a basement in his temple. The doll maker also built a basement in his storehouse, and both hid the balls behind a seal so that nobody might ever find them again. I finished listening to his story and took a big breath. I tried to sort it all out in my mind, and then I asked A's grandfather about what I still didn't understand. So, you're saying that the abandoned temple was that monk's temple, and the basement was where he hid this dream enchantment. So then, the doll maker's storehouse must be nearby too, yeah? Yeah, it's near. I mean, that doll maker was one of my ancestors, A's grandfather replied. Huh? Seriously? Why didn't you tell me? A said. And what good would come of that? His grandfather replied. A fell silent, as though sulking. It's that storehouse out there. I make sure to change the locks each year and make sure it's reinforced, so don't worry. When that temple was to be abandoned, the monk was told to take good care of it and take that ball with him. But I guess he got scared. A's grandfather had a dark look on his face, as though he was the one who abandoned the temple himself. So then, what's going to happen to that dream enchantment from the temple? A asked. Does that mean you have to keep two now? No, we can't keep two of them in the same place. I've rebuilt the Paulonia box and put another charm on it, so I've asked a chief priest I know to take it off our hands. There's no need to worry. Everyone sighed in relief, and then E, who had been silent all that time, finally spoke. Supposing that they managed to save Kay, will she ever go back to normal? I'm afraid that even if they save her life, she'll never be normal again, A's grandfather answered. I've never heard of any way to escape the power of that curse. Is that so? E said, and then started quietly crying. 3 days later, Kay passed away in the hospital. I'm sorry about Kay-chan, A's grandfather said to us after her funeral. But you are still alive, and the best way you can honor her memory is by living your lives to the fullest. I took those words to heart, and even now, I'm still living my life to the best of my abilities. It's not uncommon to see statues or figures in front of restaurants the world over, and Japan is no different. There's just something about these human-looking figures, though, that makes it seem like they could get up at any second and start moving. And for the young man in this next story, he's certain he's seen just that. Or did he? It's a sight that will haunt him for years to come. Find out why in Figure at the Popular Restaurant. There's a popular restaurant in my hometown, and it's so famous and well established that everyone around town has eaten there at least once. Let's just call that restaurant A. A is reasonably priced, but even more importantly, it's delicious and comes in huge portions. If you're ever unsure of what to eat, then you can head there and be assured that you'll be satisfied. That's how good that place really is. There was a rather large figure that stood in front of the restaurant. It was roughly 120 centimeters tall and dressed like a Western chef. It seemed to have been put there when the restaurant first opened, and so over the years it had changed colour and bits of paint had flaked off. But as the store's mascot, it did its job well, and everyone felt somewhat attached to it. When I was a student, One day, club activities finished rather late. The sun had long set, and everything would have been pitch black if not for the streetlights. I passed by the familiar A restaurant on my way home, and being that I was starving, I stopped in front of the store to peek inside. My stomach rumbled at the sight of the customers enjoying their delicious-looking food. "God damn, am I hungry," I muttered. Then I turned to look at the figure. Its eyes moved, and then its arms, as if it was getting ready to turn in my direction. Ah! I was so surprised that I thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. I took off running, unable to even scream in fear, and ran as fast as I could all the way back home. "What's got you in such a rush?" my parents said in surprise when they saw me. I was a bit old at that point to be looking so frightened about something. "The figure in front of A moved." If I actually said that, then I'd be the laughingstock of the family. Instead, I said, "No, nothing. What's for dinner?" I regained my composure and tried to play it off as though it were nothing. A few days later, our entire family decided to go to A for dinner. I joined them somewhat enthusiastically because I planned to check on that figure once again. When we got there, and before we went inside, I stared it down. The figure was made of resin and didn't have any movable parts. Its eyes were painted on, so there was no way for them to move, and the arms were also smooth and seamless, so there was no possible way for them to move either. Maybe I just imagined it, I thought. I checked that figure numerous times after that, but I never saw it move again. The only thing I could chalk it up to was that I imagined the whole thing. Years passed, and I moved away from my hometown to start work. Although I was busy, I always made sure to return home for New Year's, and it was our first family reunion in a long time. Ah, by the way, A closed down. The old man who worked there died, apparently. Hearing that made me feel both sad and nostalgic at the same time, but it also made me remember what I saw when I was younger, so I decided to bring it up. You know, I once saw the figure in front of that restaurant move. I figured they would respond like, "Not this again," or "There's no way." And then I would agree with them and that would be the end of that. But instead, my father put his chopsticks down and fell silent. Then he turned to me. "Are you being serious right now?" My father worked for a waste management company. They mostly collected local stuff, so of course they got the stuff from A when it closed down, including that figure from out the front. When he was operating the pressing machine to compress all the rubbish, something happened. He heard a scream. Everyone who was there heard it, and they all turned pale. No way. Did someone get caught in the machine? A roll call was quickly taken of all employees on site, but nobody was missing, and everyone was safe. The scream came from inside the pressing machine, so they turned it off and checked the inside. Inside, they found that shattered figure mixed in with the other waste. You're not telling me it was this thing? No way. There's no way a figure like that could scream. Nobody there could believe it, but every single one of them had heard that voice. At the time I was like, how could a doll scream? But after what you just said, now I understand, my father said. It was an experience that made me realize that there really are some strange things out there. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier member, Christina. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out our newly available hardcovers on Amazon right now, and check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys. Stay safe and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.